Hello everyone. Thank you all for coming. Glad you could be here. Today we're going to be talking about a little problem I affectionately call the ale problem. Ale is not an alcohol abuse problem. No one here is over drinking. We're not having any issues with alcohol in the company. What we're having a problem with are a handful of cards. Asher's, Liquidation, and Emerald Legionnaire. These cards are a bit of a problem. Let's look at the numbers. Asher tablets. Of the tournaments, we're not going to focus on this year because, let's face it, this year, a lot of tournament numbers are still missing. The TWB doesn't update frequently enough. So we're going to focus on the 21 numbers. So 28 decks had Asher tablets in the winning decks for that year. Let's look at Liquidation. Liquidation had 14. But let's look at the two of them combined. 5 decks out of 2021 had Liquidation and Asher tablets in the winning deck. Let's look at the other card. Emerald Legionnaire. In 2021, 12 of the decks that won had Emerald Legionnaire in them. Between Legionnaire and Liquidation, 9 decks shared those in common. So, looking at your numbers for Liquidation just in general, that's 14 decks. 5 of those decks had Asher tablets, and 9 of those decks had Emerald Legionnaire along with Liquidation. We can see exactly how we get to 14, can't we? And we look at it overall because maybe you're thinking, this isn't so significant. These numbers are small. There's no way. There's hundreds of tournaments that have won, and these can't be the results. Well, let's look at those numbers. Of what's reported in 2021 with decks without Asher tablets, Emerald Legionnaires, or Liquidation, that's not what the numbers show us. The numbers show us something much, much different. The numbers here show us that 79 events happened in 2021, in which 1/3 of events contained Asher tablets. More than 10% of events contained Emerald Legionnaires. More than 10% of events contained Liquidation. And more than 10% of the decks contained a combination of at least 2 of the 3. Now here's the thing. Everybody keeps saying, there's other ways you can just deal with this problem. Right? It's not a big problem. It can be dealt with. Well, let's look at the results of final tables, right? Let's see how well they're dealing with these things. So we've got a lot of events, all of which contain, well, you look at that, a lot of the problem we're staring at. It's a big solvable problem at every table, and yet consistently, here we find all of these cards appearing at the final tables. How can that be? If this is such an easily solvable problem and anybody can deal with that, how do we end up with events, very recent events, where at some tables there's as many as 3 decks containing these problematic cards or perceived problematic cards? Well, let's look at what the solutions here are. So we have the argument I hear the most about any card in the game, what I call the eternal argument. Just play cards that deal with the problem. Cards like Vulture's Buffet or Cold Amber's Hold. Cards like Irincine's Fragments or Emergency Rations. Or even the one I've heard most, Victim of Habit. Let's go over these cards one by one, shall we? Vulture's Buffet. It's not directed. That's great. It is a hunt action, so it works around some cards that would stop you otherwise from hunting. And you get a free unlock out of it. Seems really good. However, it's limited to being Obfuscate, maybe Spiritus if you happen to be playing a Spiritus deck, but let's face it, there's only one good Ahriman. It's only usable against allies and retainers. You can use it against minions, but they have to obviously be ashed. Not going to happen very often. What I mostly mean in this statement is you can't use it against other cards, which is one of the big issues you're going to have if you're dealing with the Asher's problem. It's completely pointless to have if there are no allies or retainers in the Asher's deck, because you're not even going to get a single card out of it. And of course, it's a +1 stealth action. It does have Obfuscate backing it up, but it is still blockable. Let's look at Cold Amber's hold now, and some of the other holds. Some of these are pretty nice cards. They are very difficult to remove in most cases, aside from Cheerums. It's very useful against even non-Ale decks. And it does make it a lot more difficult to play the cards. You are basically looking at a card that will increase the price of whatever card they're playing. It takes 4 blood, in some cases 2, in some cases pool, and actions or master phase actions or some combination thereof. So cost-wise, these are not bad cards, but the problems kind of build up. The first is you can only play one of them on a player at any given time. Once it's out, if you pick the wrong card, too bad, you're going to have to wait on it to maybe never get removed. Thankfully, any vampire can do it, which maybe means your vampires are going to have to do it, so you can get the right card. It's also only usable against specific cards, so you have to make sure that what you're playing with is going to have enough targets that you're going to get something valuable enough out of it. It is obviously blockable, and it is a 0 stealth action, and it's directed. Going to be really hard to get this card across, and it's rather expensive at 2 blood. All of these are a little bit pricey in the whole holds department. This one just happens to be the one that it's the most versatile against any sort of ale-related problem. Moving on from there, the Ursenes, I can never pronounce this card. I'm not even going to try. Fragments, I like this card a lot. This card can allow you to use the cards that are on the card. There's a limitation, obviously, and you can do this over and over again, and each of those cards is going to be removed from game every time you use them. However, it's unique, so you only get one of them. You have to be able to meet the requirements of the cards if you expect to play them, and when you can't play the cards, they're just stuck there, and you can't get them out. The card can also be stolen, and rather easily, if I might add, if you're not playing some sort of intercept deck. And it's going to be stolen, potentially, by the very deck you don't want it to. A deck playing Legionnaires will likely steal this card from you, and then never let you take it back, because they have Auspex, and they don't intend to let it go. Not really as effective. Emergency Rations could be an interesting card, because it does give you a free Giant's Blood. It is fully repeatable. You can do it any number of times. You can only put one on a vampire any turn, but you're not really going to free drive and do it again anyway. It's also another undirected action at +1 stealth. So really good from that aspect. However, it's mortals only. Very limited list available. Plus, you're going to have to play Nagaraja, which there's not a lot of them, and they're not all very good. And, of course, it can obviously be blocked. Maybe not a good solution either. Well, let's look at that last one. Let's look at that one that everybody keeps talking about, Victim of Habit. Well, Victim of Habit seems nice, right? It deals pool damage. That's something we want. It deals it to our prey. That's very good. It's not expensive. Only costs a single blood. It's got a +1 stealth action attached to it as well, so you're not gonna have to. You're gonna have to at least see people get an intercept to stop it because it's undirected. And you can put more than one of these in play. You can name a number of different cards and use all of them at the same time. However, it does only work on your prey. If your predator is the one playing Emerald Legionnaires, this card isn't going to do anything for you. If your predator is playing, if your prey is playing less than 3 copies of a card and you picked that card, guess you're not going to Victim of Habit either. But the hardest part of this card is it's only usable during your unlock phase. That means that any deck with liquidation is going to wait for you to do your thing, or refrain from doing your thing because you don't have enough, then play a liquidation. Also, during the unlock phase, you don't have priority first. Your prey has priority first. Against Legionnaires, they're going to activate the first Legionary and bring out more Legionnaires. Then you'll get Victim of Habit back. Probably not a great idea to choose Victim of Habit, or choose Emerald Legionnaires as your Victim of Habit target. But I know what you're saying. This is just unreasonable. There's other solutions, right? Why don't you just use the finish decision? You can just rush the cards that are the problem. You can use ambushes, you can use Purity of the Beast, you can use slams, you can use weighted walking sticks and 44 magnums. You can use any number of cards you want to just knock it out of the box. It doesn't have to be an opponent at all. Just kill it. Except that you're playing against a deck with Auspex, so it'll just Eyes of Argus, get some enhanced senses, and then it'll, if they're really worried about killing it and you happen to get by, well, they'll just Heaven's Gate it to stop it from dying, or they'll leave it for dead. Or maybe even they might even go out of the way and play Martyr's Resilience, just because they want to be funny. You don't really get a lot of options here in the way of saving your stopping the problem with combat. Combat isn't going to solve the equation. Okay. So fine. But their cards are fine in a vacuum. So that means they're fine. We don't need to worry about these cards. If the card is fine in a vacuum, they don't need a nerfing, they don't need to change. Everything is just fine with them. But that's not how cards work in a card game. This is a CCG. Cards are evolving all the time. You can't decide arbitrarily that because the card is just fine if you don't play any of the other cards with it, the card doesn't need anything done. That's not how card games work. It's never been how these kinds of card games work. You just end up with problems like this. So why settle for this? We don't have to. I know that a lot of you don't want to see it, and I know that a lot of you think it's a bad idea. But seriously, this is a problem. It's a problem that we can fix, and it's a problem that should be fixed. Do I have the exact answer to how we fix it? No, I don't. Do I think that people need to get more so on board with admitting that there is a problem caused between these cards and that some of these cards do need to have a solution, and a lot of this pushback of I don't want my favorite card to be hurt needs to go away? Yes. When you have results that show that in the last 2 months, the largest tournaments that we've had all consistently have these decks in their top 5, and when 20% or more, really 35 to 40% of your meta contains these cards, it is certainly not the kind of meta that you want to play in. And this is why we need to work to solve the ale problem. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.